Neil from Essex here to do a little bit of filter dissection here with you today. Over the last couple of years, I've cut apart several different filters and kind of compared what you're going to find inside the OEM filters versus what you'll find from other alternatives. And we've never been here to sit and say that like you should always run OEM filters, but I think over the years of doing this, there's an element of you get what you pay for when it comes to this kind of thing, right? Buy a cheap filter, get a cheap filter. But one thing I haven't done was specifically seek out a real premium filter that maybe could be an improvement over what the OEM looks like. And so today we're going to do that. So this is Kubota's most popular filter, HH150-32094. Can rattle the number right off from memory. It's about a $13 and change filter on Messix.com. And today we're going to compare that to a K&N filter that goes over $15 and change or so. So let's see what the extra couple of bucks might get you.
Messix, a helping hand with your land.
So this is a filter cutter, kind of like a can opener for filters, right? If there's anything that I've kind of really recognized over the years of doing this is the one significant difference that I've found between better quality filters is the can. Lighter filters really often will have really tinny, weak cans. And on a tractor, that's something you want to consider. The filter here oftentimes is going to hang off the bottom of the tractor, off the side of your engine. And so that kind of physical construction of the can of the filter itself kind of actually matters, right? If a stick pops up, you're out working and brush somewhere, these things are often getting whacked by things that are going by. And so having a physically heavier can does help give some protection to it, right? And I could tell this as soon as I picked this up, cutting it here with the filter cutter and banging on things. The can on the K&N here is a little heavier than some others that we've seen. So K&N does list this as the cross-reference on their website here, but you look at the underside of this, there are some differences. The pipe threading on the middle looks the same. The surface that the gaskets here are going to face on look the same, but the Kubota one itself is overall a little bit physically wider. One thing that I do like on these Kubota filters, these come through with plastic over top of them, and the O-rings typically have a little bit of oil on them out of the box. This one came in a paper box and was completely dry. When we push on the rubber here themselves, again, just kind of going from filter to filter, this one is a little harder on the K&N, but I do like kind of the profile here. It has a pretty large surface to seal against the engine. So not quite as pliable when you go and crank it down, but I would say that's probably going to seal pretty well, so I'd be happy with what I see there. So looking at the insides of these, first we have these seals up here on the top, and despite the fact that these look very different from each other, they're serving the same mechanical purpose, and I'm not sure that the difference here is really anything that matters, right? These are here to keep oil, dirty oil from washing from in the filter back out into the engine again, and their function is to cover these holes here in the top portion of the filter. Because these holes are in different spots, then these rubber gaskets then are shaped a little bit differently because of that. So if the top's off here and we start digging into the filters themselves, the first place I actually go is not to the filter element, it's to the underside. On the bottom of these cans, you'll always find one of these two designs, either this spring or this kind of like plate here. And the intention of these is to push this filter element up against the bottom of the lid here. And these are done in two different ways. I tend to prefer these when I see the mechanical spring in here, because this, again, is mechanically pushing the filter up against the bottom of the lid. Sometimes you see this kind of like formed piece of metal in here. This doesn't spring at all, right? It's simply a spacer to be able to hold this filter up, and so there is mechanically not anything that pushes it up against the bottom of the lid. Again, it's nitpicking mechanical differences here, probably doesn't really matter. As we keep going down here on the underside of these, you'll see this little interesting spring and blue thing sticking out, and on the Kubota there's this little button here in the bottom. These are bypass valves, so that if this thing plugs up in some fashion, oil can still bypass the filter element and not starve your engine. Interestingly, when we push down on these two, the bypass actually feels pretty much the same. That is radically different between these things. Again, this is my super scientific push it with my finger test, but I've done these before where there's been no bypass at all in some of these filters, or the bypass pressure could come back being very different, right? This is fundamentally an automotive filter that gets crossed over to all kinds of different equipment, and not specifically engineered for the Kubota engine that it's going on to, right? So sometimes you find these weird differences where, you know, on a Ford, they wanted to bypass at one pressure, but a Kubota diesel might be completely different. And so, you know, oftentimes when we kind of feel these things out, they come out feeling a little bit different. And in this case, they're fairly the same. We could take a look here at the filter element itself. This is challenging for me to be able to do because it's difficult to know anything about these specific materials, right? I'm not an expert to be able to talk about the paper, but I can show you here that the K&N is overall a smaller filter. Has less pleating in it overall than what's in the Kubota filter. For those reasons, isn't going to flow quite as much, right? You would expect a larger filter, more surface area to flow a little bit more quickly and have a little bit more filtering capacity. So overall, this is a smaller element. So I've cut open some like Wix Napa stuff before and just been shocked when you open up the inside of these cans and find what's in here. Because sometimes these things have been super, super small, but this one, I wouldn't give me super amounts of heartburn about. Lastly, I think it's worth pointing out here on the bottom of the can, so we give K&N all the credit that we can here where it's due. They put this little doodad here on the bottom for you to be able to get a wrench here around the bottom of the can in order to help loosen it. You know, most all oil filters are going to have the ribbing around the side here if you come in with a proper oil filter wrench that you can get a hold of this. But you could use a traditional wrench here if you need to break this loose, because we all know that Kubota employs a team of gorillas that put these things on. So I started saving these here as we go, and so just to kind of give you some of these subtle differences here, right? We got the Kubota K&N and no-name Amazon knockoff special. There would certainly be some impression with people out here that when you look at filters that they all come out of the same factory, right? They're all the same in some function, and I have never seen that personally. All the ones that we've cut open here to this some point, I've never looked and seen what appears to be the same parts one to the next, right? When we look at gaskets, filter materials, that kind of stuff, there's always subtle differences between them. And one is not necessarily like the other. And my opinion on this stuff is that this is always a case of you get what you pay for to a point. Cheaper filters have always seemed cheap, right? For some reason, more premium ones like this K&N have value, right? You spend a little bit more money, you get a little bit better product, right? That's how markets should work. But unfortunately, the impression of many of our customers oftentimes is that the dealerships or the big manufacturers are trying to take advantage of you in some fashion. And that couldn't be further from the truth with this kind of thing, right? They're aware you have choices, and so they price these things competitively. And you'll notice that if you go to Messick's.com, you check out all the stuff that we have there online for you. I think most of the time this stuff is priced very fairly. There certainly are going to be some exceptions to that, particularly when you get into some like high performance hydraulic filters and specialty stuff like that. But a lot of your, say, engine oil filters that get replaced on your machine fairly often, $13, right? Not a big deal. It certainly gives you some peace of mind when it comes to taking care of your equipment. So if you're shopping for a piece of machinery and we can help, you have parts and service needs for equipment you've already got, give us a call at Messick's. We're available at 800-222-3373 or online at Messick's.com. And that does move.